Have you ever sat down at a family lunch, your heart pounding, knowing that what you're about to say might shake not just the meal, but the relationships that have held your family together for decades? That's exactly how I felt that day. In front of me sat my husband, the man I've trusted for over 30 years, his eyes serious, heavy with expectation. Beside him, my son looked at me with a mixture of hope and worry, silently begging me to say what they wanted to hear. And then there was my daughter. She sat quietly, eyes wary, scrolling through her phone, but I could feel her attention was on me, not the screen. Every subtle movement, every slight shift, told me she was trying to anticipate what I would say. I'm a woman in my late 50s. I've spent most of my adult life raising our children and helping build my husband's business from the ground up. I sacrificed career ambitions, opportunities to grow professionally, and even personal dreams so that our family would thrive. Now, after decades of dedication, I was being asked to do something I wasn't comfortable with. Convince my daughter-in-law to become a traditional wife, just like I was. And in that moment, everything I had once considered normal, all those years of quiet sacrifices, suddenly felt like the source of tension in our family. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I understood my daughter-in-law perfectly. I had left the workforce, given up my career, and dedicated myself entirely to our family. I knew the risks of being a wife fully dependent on a husband because I had lived them. I had also made meticulous contingency plans for every possible scenario: financial records, documented contributions, digitized evidence of all the work I'd done so I would never have to rely solely on anyone's generosity. My wife doesn't want to be a traditional wife, my son said, his tone a mix of playful and serious. She's worried. Mum, can you tell her how you made it work? I looked directly into my son's eyes, reading the hope and the frustration there. He expected me to tell a perfect story of sacrifice and trust, of giving everything to my husband and then reaping the rewards. But the truth is, I have lived through that sacrifice, and I know all too well the risks that most people don't see. I understand how your wife feels, I said, my voice calm but firm. Being a full-time wife, completely dependent on your husband, is incredibly risky. Nothing in life is guaranteed. And believe me, I've prepared for every scenario, so I wouldn't have to rely on anyone's mercy. My husband's brows knitted together, a shadow of anger flickering across his face. You've always had one foot out the door, he said, voice tense with frustration. Have you been planning to take over the business behind my back? I drew in a steady breath. I knew his anger wasn't truly about mistrust, it was because I saw a reality he didn't want to face. This business was ours, but he had always thought of it as his alone. And precisely because of that, I had kept meticulous records of my contributions over the years, so that I could protect myself and the work I had put into building this family legacy. Everything I've done has been to protect myself, I said, voice firm but gentle. I have detailed records of every contribution I've made to the family and the business. I've digitized it all, so if the worst ever happened, I wouldn't be at anyone's mercy. And I will not force your wife to do something she doesn't want to do. My husband and son both flushed with anger. The tension in the room thickened, every sound clinking cutlery, ticking clock, distant traffic felt amplified, pressing down on all of us. I realized my words had struck a nerve, challenging their traditional view of marriage and family. But I didn't regret it. Standing my ground was the only way to protect my autonomy and self-respect. In that tense moment, memories came flooding back. The early days of our marriage, leaving my career, working side by side with my husband to build a business from nothing, giving up personal ambitions so the family could thrive. I remembered the nights I stayed awake worrying, the loneliness, but also the pride in what we had accomplished together. I remembered the late nights solving business crises, the countless moments I swallowed my own feelings for the sake of family stability. Every dollar, every contract, every quiet sacrifice that went unnoticed. Now, all of that experience had become my anchor, giving me the strength to remain resolute in this moment. I looked at my daughter-in-law, intelligent, independent, and felt a surge of responsibility. I could not allow her to be vulnerable in the way I once was. I could not coerce her into following a path she didn't want. "My son," I said, softer now, "I know this disappoints you, but I cannot do what you're asking. Everyone must choose their own path. I will be here to share my experience, protect what I've built, and support your wife if she chooses her own path." The room fell silent. Every one of us was lost in thought. And in that silence, I felt the weight of my words linger, knowing this conversation would leave a lasting mark on our family. But I wasn't afraid. I knew that sometimes, speaking the truth even when it causes tensions, the only way to protect love, independence, and honesty. I caught my daughter-in-law's gaze caution, surprised, but also relieved. She realized there was someone in this family who would not pressure her into a life she didn't want. I also realized that standing firm didn't mean losing family love. It simply set a boundary, showing that freedom and love could coexist. By the time lunch ended, my heart was still racing, but I felt calmer inside. I had spoken the truth, protected both myself and my daughter-in-law, and still loved my husband and children. It was a moment of tension and relief intertwined, a reminder that life isn't only about sacrifice or compliance. Sometimes it's about choosing to stand firm, even when it's hard. After that tense lunch, the air in the room still felt heavy, as if my words were lingering, hanging over everyone. I could see it clearly in my daughter-in-law's eyes, the mix of confusion and curiosity. She didn't say a word, but every small gesture, twisting her hair, a slight shrug, biting her lower lip, revealed that she was trying to figure out if she could trust me, if I was going to pressure her or judge her. I gave her a small, sincere smile, just a hint, but it was enough to show I wasn't there to control her. My husband stayed seated, silent, but his eyes never left me. I felt his disappointment, mixed with frustration, as if he believed my stance was a silent betrayal. In his mind, the family and business would only be stable if everyone followed the rules he believed were right. But I'd realized long ago that stability often came at the cost of someone giving up their autonomy. And I could not ask my daughter-in-law to do that. My son, his hands nervously fiddling with his nails, looked torn. I could see him wrestling with conflicting feelings, wanting to protect his mother, feeling proud of the family's achievements, and worrying about his wife's happiness. Finally, my daughter-in-law spoke, hesitantly. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying a blend of relief and curiosity. "Thank you. I think I understand better now. I don't have to do what you did, but I see that I'm not alone in making my choices." I nodded, warmth spreading through me. That wasn't victory, it was a moment of real connection. A moment where each of us felt respected. I realized that standing firm didn't create distance. Sometimes it built true trust, letting others know their choices were valued. I recounted part of my past details I had rarely shared. The late nights working with my husband, handling contracts and crises. The moments of loneliness and fear when I felt the weight of responsibility, but still had to smile for the children, hiding my own anxieties. I did what I did because I trusted your father, I said gently, but I also knew that without precautions, I would have been extremely vulnerable. Trusting someone doesn't mean ignoring your own safety. I learned to balance both. Her eyes softened. I could see she wasn't just hearing theory anymore. She was beginning to understand that independence and personal security matter, and that trust doesn't have to mean complete dependence. My husband's frown deepened, voice heavy. She sees you managed fine your whole life. Why bring up risk now? I looked him straight in the eye. Because the truth matters. I want my daughter-in-law to know she has choices. Protecting herself doesn't contradict trust. I've lived both, and I've learned to find that balance. My son exhaled, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He realized that my stance wasn't betrayal, was a lesson about maturity, independence, and making one's own choices. We sat in silence for a long moment. I looked around the room, the sunlight streaming through the blinds, the leftover plates on the table, the ticking of the clock, and understood that this tension was evidence of change. Each of us was learning to respect autonomy, responsibility, and trust in our own way. Then my daughter-in-law spoke again, quieter but firmer. Thank you. I feel I understand now. I don't have to do the same as you, but I know I'm not alone in my decisions. I smiled. That warmth in the room wasn't about winning. It was about connection and respect. I also realized that holding my ground didn't mean driving a wedge between us. Sometimes it fostered trust, showing that personal choice could coexist with family love. My husband still looked a bit frustrated, but I saw acknowledgement in his eyes that my daughter-in-law's independence wasn't a threat. My son, though still uneasy, seemed to grasp the meaning behind my words, and I knew this conversation would be revisited many times, in many ways. But it would leave a lasting impact on our family. As lunch ended and people stood up, I looked at my daughter-in-law and said softly, I'll always be here if you want to talk, but I also trust you to make your own choices. She smiled and nodded, and in that moment, I realized a turning point. She wasn't just hearing me anymore. She was starting to trust in her own strength and autonomy. Walking away from the table, I felt a strange mix of relief and lingering tension. I knew today had been important, not just because I had defended my daughter, but because I had taught our family a lesson about trust, respect, and the right to choose. And in that quiet moment before everyone left the room, I looked around, mentally tallying the risks I had accounted for, the contributions I had documented. I knew I had done right not to win, but to protect myself and those I loved in the smartest, most steadfast way possible. After that tense lunch, the atmosphere in the house still felt heavy, as if my words were hanging over everyone, refusing to settle. I found myself washing dishes in the kitchen, but my eyes kept flicking to the dining area, where my husband sat with his chin propped on his hand, eyes full of thought and lingering frustration. My son paced in the living room, his foot tapping rapidly, hands fidgeting nervously. Both of them were wrestling with emotions they had rarely confronted before. My husband has always been the type to believe that control and authority are the only ways to maintain order in the family and the business. I understood that, but today my unwavering stance was a shock. He had always assumed I would comply, that I would guide my daughter-in-law to follow the same path I had. My refusal felt to him like a direct challenge, a threat to his sense of security. "I can't believe this," he finally blurted out after lunch, voice heavy with tension. "After all these years, you still keep one foot out the door." I met his gaze steadily. "You see it as a threat," I said calmly. "But for me, it's preparation. Preparation for any possibility, to protect myself and the family. You see the business as yours alone, and that's why it worries you. But the truth is, we built it together. You don't see the countless quiet contributions I've made, so you assume I want to take over. In reality, I just want to protect myself," fanned your wife. He exhaled, a flicker of surprise crossing his features beneath the anger. In his eyes, I could see a mix of frustration and fear. The fear of losing control. The anxiety that everything he'd built could be challenged by truths he had long avoided confronting. My son approached, voice trembling. "Mum, I don't know what to do. My wife, she's listening, but everything you're saying, it's making Dad and me, He faltered, eyes betraying the conflict inside, wanting to protect his mother, feeling pride in the family legacy, and struggling with the helplessness of seeing his wife under unexpected pressure. My daughter-in-law stayed quiet in the corner, observing. I could see her unease, the mixture of fear and cautious curiosity. She was hesitant, but also beginning to realize that not everything depended on her following someone else's footsteps. I smiled softly, offering encouragement without imposing it. "I know it's overwhelming," she said, her voice small but determined. "But are you sure everything will be okay if I don't follow the path you took?" I stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm not saying it will always be perfect, but I can share my experience, and I'll always be here if you need guidance. What matters most is that you make your own decisions. Nobody has the right to force you into a mold you don't want to fit." My son glanced at me, hesitating, then turned to his wife. I think Mum just wants what's best for you, but I don't fully understand it yet." I could see the struggle in his eyes, wanting to protect his wife, pride in family tradition, and the discomfort of realizing that his mother isn't who he assumed she was. My husband rose, pacing a few steps, hands on his hips, eyes fixed on us without daring to make direct eye contact. He exhaled heavily and spoke slowly. You've always done things your way. But do you realize that when you say these things, I feel left out? My whole life, I've worked to create security, and you plan for every possibility without me." I drew a steady breath, voice soft but firm. "You call it distrust, but I've never stopped trusting. I just don't want myself or your wife to be vulnerable if something happens. You see the business as yours, but it's ours. You don't see the quiet contributions I've made, so you assume I want to take it over. In truth, I'm only protecting myself and your wife." My husband fell silent. In his eyes, I could see the mixture of anger, disappointment, and the faintest hint of recognition, as if he was wrestling with a reality he had long refused to accept, that trusting someone doesn't mean blind dependence, and independence doesn't equal betrayal. I glanced at my daughter and noticed a subtle shift, small, relieved smile forming as she began to understand she had a choice. Not a choice against family, but a choice to protect herself, with support rather than pressure. I turned to my son. "You may not understand this fully now, but I want you to see that I'm not against the family. I'm protecting each of us in the smartest way possible. Once you grasp this, you'll understand the value of independence and choice." He nodded lightly, still uneasy, but beginning to recognize that today's conflict wasn't a fight between mother and son or mother and father. It was a lesson in growing up and personal autonomy. My husband, after a moment of silence, sighed and sat down. The intensity in his eyes had softened, though calm had not fully returned. I knew he was still processing the challenge to his sense of control, but he had glimpsed a truth he'd long avoided. Love and trust do not require surrendering personal freedom. My daughter-in-law turned to me, this time with more confidence. "Thank you for letting me see that I'm not alone." I smiled back, feeling a subtle warmth spread through the room. The connection wasn't about agreement, it was about mutual respect, choice, and growth. In that moment, I realized that today marked a turning point. The conflict hadn't turned into resentment, but into an opportunity for our family to learn to respect independence, trust, and personal responsibility. And quietly, within me, a sense of calm rose, knowing that this journey, though challenging, would help us all grow and set the stage for the next turning point in our family story. The next morning, the house felt heavy, like a fog that hadn't lifted overnight. I woke up early, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat in the living room, watching the sunlight streak across the lawn, cutting through the trees in golden rays. There was a deceptive calm in the air, but deep down, I knew today would be decisive. My husband had gotten up even earlier than usual. I could hear his footsteps upstairs, brisk and purposeful, almost echoing the tension in his chest. I knew he was wrestling with his emotions, the challenge to his authority, his pride, and the fear of losing control. Today wasn't going to be a casual conversation. Today, we would confront truths we had long avoided. Downstairs, my son and daughter-in-law were already in the living room. Their expressions still bore the remnants of yesterday's tension. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and prepared for the conversation I knew would be anything but easy. "We need to talk," I began, my voice calm but firm. "Yesterday things got tense, and I know there are still a lot of unresolved feelings. I don't want us to keep silent or pretend everything is fine. We need to face the truth." My husband rose, his features tight, eyes fixed on me. "The truth is, you've always prepared for every scenario without me. You call it safety, but I call it distrust. We've been married over 30 years, and you've always kept one foot out the door, and now you're doing this to our daughter." I met his gaze steadily. "You call it distrust, you call it betrayal, but I have never stopped trusting you. I just don't want myself or your daughter-in-law to be vulnerable if something goes wrong. I want her to understand she has the right to choose her own path, without relying entirely on someone else." My son stepped forward, voice wavering. "Mum, I'm confused too. I never thought this would get so complicated. My wife is listening, and I don't know whose side to be on." His eyes reflected the inner conflict, wanting to protect his wife, pride in his mother, and anxiety about the family's future. My daughter-in-law stood quietly, observing, then suddenly spoke. "Everyone, I know I'm still young and haven't lived through as much, but I don't want to be forced into a mold I don't belong in. I need to make my own choices." Her voice trembled, yet carried clarity. Like the first declaration of autonomy, the room went silent. I realized this was the critical moment. Everyone had to confront their own choices. My husband sighed, pacing a few steps with hands on his hips. I've spent my life creating stability for this family. I thought if everyone followed the plan, we'd be safe and happy. But now you're challenging everything I believed. I responded, firm but gentle. You call it a challenge, but I call it protection. Protecting the family, your wife, and myself. If you see the business as yours alone, you won't understand why I kept records, why I made plans. Everything I do is not against you, it's to safeguard all of us. My son stepped closer, placing a hand on his wife's shoulder. See, Mum only wants what's best for you. But I still don't fully understand. He looked at his wife, eyes anxious, yet slowly beginning to grasp the value of her mother's words. My daughter-in-law took a deep breath, her eyes brightening with determination. I don't want to disappoint anyone, but I can't give up on myself. I need to choose my own path. My husband froze, his body rigid, then suddenly sank into a chair. He sat in silence, wrestling with the sense of betrayal and the reality he had long avoided. Love and trust don't require surrendering each person's autonomy. I stepped closer, my voice softer now but unwavering. You may feel challenged, but I'm not against you or the family. I want everyone to understand that independence and choice don't diminish love or trust. On the contrary, the more we respect each other, the stronger the family becomes. My daughter-in-law's eyes shone with newfound confidence, a small smile forming. She finally realized that independence doesn't mean going against the family. It means growing up and having the right to decide her own life. My son, after a pause, exhaled deeply. Mum, I get it now. I'll support my wife, and I'll try to understand you better too. My husband, still not completely calm, sighed and opened his eyes. There was a trace of acknowledgement that personal choice and independence don't lessen love or family bonds. In that moment, the room was filled with a different kind of silence, not tension, but relief. Each of us had stood firm in our beliefs, yet also understood one another. The conflict had peaked, and now everyone knew that going forward, choices would be respected. I turned to my daughter-in-law. Remember, I'll always be here if you need me, but I also trust you to make your own decisions. She smiled and nodded, and for the first time that morning, I felt a perfect balance between autonomy, love, and trust. That day ended with the sense that our family had grown. The conflict wasn't fully resolved, but it had become an opportunity to understand one another, to respect independence and personal responsibility. It was a turning point, paving the way for important decisions to come, and showing that love and personal freedom can coexist if everyone has the courage to face the truth. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the living room windows, casting long golden streaks across the wooden floor. The air felt lighter than it had this morning, though I could still sense a subtle tension lingering, like a thread of emotions not fully released. I sank into the armchair, sipping my hot tea, watching my husband, son, and daughter-in-law sitting round the table. Each was absorbed in their own thoughts, but the atmosphere was no longer as heavy as yesterday's lunch. My husband exhaled slowly, gazing out the window. I've been thinking all morning, he said, his voice calmer than before. Maybe I was too harsh. I want the family to be safe. I want everyone to follow tradition, but I forgot that everyone has the right to choose their own path. I nodded gently, warmth in my smile. realizing that is the most important thing. Everyone in this family deserves to make their own choices. We don't lose anything by respecting each other's independence. On the contrary, it makes our love and connection stronger. My daughter-in-law looked at him, her eyes bright but cautious. I know yesterday and this morning. Maybe it seemed like I didn't understand or wasn't cooperating. But I just want the right to make my own decisions. I want to live true to myself, not just because someone expects it, for the first time. My husband's gaze softened, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, as if he was really hearing his daughter-in-law for the first time. Without judgment or assumptions, he nodded slowly. I understand. I see that you need your own path, and I respect that. My son, after a moment of silence, placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. Me too. I know I may have put pressure on you, but from now on, I'll try to understand and support your decisions. We'll do this together. No one has to go alone. The room felt lighter, smiles flickering across faces. I realized that the tension that had built up for so long was finally easing. The conflict hadn't vanished entirely, but it had transformed into understanding, respect, and genuine love. I stood and walked over to my husband, taking his hand. 30 years together, we've learned so much. But the most important lesson is learning to trust and respect each other without needing to control or impose. Today, we've shown that love and independence can coexist. He looked at me, his eyes warm, filled with relief. He gave a rare smile, one I hadn't seen in years, true smile of understanding. Our daughter-in-law stepped forward, placing her hand in mine. Thank you. Thank you for letting me see that I'm not alone and that I don't have to live under someone else's expectations. I'll try to live authentically and still stay connected with the family. I hugged her, feeling warmth flood my chest. I knew she would walk her own path, but she was no longer alone. We had created a safe space where everyone could be themselves while maintaining love and family connection. My son looked at me, voice steady and heartfelt. Mum, I realize now that you've always been looking out for us in your own way, preparing for every possibility. I feel lucky to have you, and I want to learn to trust and respect those around me better, too. I smiled, heart full. This was a moment to remember, not because we had won a debate, but because everyone had learned to see and accept each other. Each person had grown, and every choice moving forward would come from mutual respect. My husband placed a hand on my shoulder, voice warmer than ever. We've come a long way, and today I realize love isn't just protection or control. It's respect. It's allowing each other freedom. I nodded, feeling my heart beat slow, peaceful. Years of worry, planning, and preparation, all of it, had culminated in this serenity. We had crossed an important milestone, and the family bond felt stronger than ever. That afternoon, we sat together, enjoying tea, sharing stories, laughing, and truly listening. No tension, no pressure, no doubt. Everyone began to understand that family happiness doesn't come from conformity, comes from allowing each person to be themselves, while still loving one another. I looked at my daughter-in-law and smiled. We all have the right to choose our own lives. The important thing is that we remain together, supporting and respecting one another. She nodded, eyes glistening. Yes, I'll remember that. My husband glanced out the window, exhaling once more, but this time with relief. I believe that from today, our family will be different. We'll be stronger because we've learned to respect and love each other in our own ways. The afternoon faded into evening, the sunlight softening, but inside me, a lasting sense of peace remained. The conflict had been resolved, important decisions had been made, and our family stepped into a new chapter, one of respect, freedom, and genuine love. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was completely different. Gentle sunlight streamed through the windows, bringing a sense of relief I hadn't felt in weeks. I brewed a cup of tea and settled into my armchair, watching my husband, son, and daughter-in-law prepare for breakfast. There was no tension, no anxious or frustrated expressions, just quiet, as if everyone was reflecting on themselves and their relationships in a calm, measured way. My husband looked at me, a rare smile on his face. "I woke up early to think," he said. "I realize now that family doesn't only need protection or control, it needs trust and respect for each person's choices." Yesterday, maybe I was too rigid. I smiled, warmth spreading through me. Understanding that is the most important thing. The strength of a family isn't in everyone following the same mold, it's in allowing each person to be themselves while still loving one another. My daughter-in-law looked at me, her eyes glistening. "I know I'm still young, but I want to learn how to be independent while staying connected to the family. Thank you for giving me the space to do that." I placed a hand on hers. "You'll find your balance, and you're never alone. Family is a support system, but it's also a place where you can be free." My son stepped forward, taking his wife's hand, then turning to me. "Mum, I realize now that everything you've done has always come from love and care for us. I feel lucky to have you, and I'll learn to respect and understand everyone better too." Looking at all of them together, I felt something extraordinary, a bond stronger than before, built not on control but on understanding, respect, and genuine love. What had once been conflict, doubt, and tension had transformed into the foundation for mutual comprehension. That afternoon, we sat down to lunch, talking about personal plans, dreams, and aspirations. My daughter-in-law shared her goals for further education and career growth, while my son listened, nodding supportively. My husband watched us interact, a quiet smile on his face, realizing that trusting and respecting personal choices doesn't weaken family ties, strengthens them. I remembered the years I left work to care for the family. Choosing the traditional path didn't mean giving up preparation, keeping records, planning contingencies, and maintaining financial independence was not only about self. It was a lesson for the next generation about the importance of self-reliance and being prepared for life. Looking at my daughter, I realized that my story wasn't about pressure or control. It was proof that whether one chooses a traditional or modern path, what truly matters is respecting yourself, preparing wisely, and keeping the freedom to choose. The afternoon passed with us tidying the house together, laughter echoing through every corner. No more doubt, no more tension. Every step, every gesture was in harmony, reflecting the new understanding we had built. Stepping out into the garden, watching the trees sway in the breeze, I realized the most important lesson of this journey. Love is not control, trust is not dependency, and family is not about imposing, it's about support and respect. My husband stood beside me, quiet eyes gentle. I used to think control was the only way to keep things safe, but now I see freedom and personal choice are what matter most. When people are allowed to be themselves, the family is truly happy. I held his hand gently. We've been through so much together, but today we've grown. We understand that love, trust, and respect must go hand in hand for a family to be strong. My son, looking at his wife and me, smiled warmly. I feel lucky to have Mum and Dad. We'll learn to love, respect, and support each other to keep the family happy. My daughter-in-law smiled, eyes bright. I understand now that I can be independent and still stay connected to the family. I'll walk my own path, but never drift away from them. As the sun set, we stood in the yard together, watching the last golden rays fade. A sense of peace settled over all of us. The conflict had been resolved, important decisions had been made, and we were stepping into a new chapter of genuine love, mutual respect, and personal freedom in that moment. I realized that life isn't always easy, but the greatest lesson we've learned is this: a strong family isn't built on control, it's built on respect, love, and support, allowing each person to be themselves. We laughed, shared memories, and gazed at the purple-tinged sky. I knew the journey ahead was still long, but today we had laid a solid foundation, one of love, trust, respect, and freedom from this day forward. Every family member would continue on their own path, yet no one would walk alone. We had learned how to love without imposing, trust without dependency, and live authentically while keeping the family close. In the days that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. The tension, arguments, and hidden anxieties had faded. Instead, there was calm, a gentle pace, and a sense of ease. Each family member seemed to have found their place, now with a deeper understanding of respect, choice, and one another. That morning, I woke early and stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the crisp, fresh air. Sunlight bathed the trees in a warm glow, illuminating the small garden we had tended together for years. I smiled, thinking of my daughter-in-law, my son, and my husband. Each had crossed a pivotal moment in our family life, and now everything seemed to be moving toward true harmony. My daughter-in-law appeared with a cup of hot tea, smiling at me. "I feel so much lighter now," she said. "I'm no longer afraid that choosing my own path means turning away from family. I see now that I can be independent and still be loved." I nodded warmly. "You're on the right path. Independence doesn't mean separation. Family is always a place to return to, but it's also a place that respects who you are." My son followed, placing his hand on his wife's shoulder. "I see things more clearly now," he said. "We've all grown through the past tense of tension. I promise to support you, to listen, and to face challenges together." My husband stepped out, watching the two of them, then turning to me. 30 years together, we've learned a lot. But the greatest lesson is this: love isn't about control. It's about respect, trust, and giving each other space. When people are allowed to be themselves, the family is truly happy. A wave of peace washed over me. Years of worry, planning, and preparation had led to this moment. I realized that a family doesn't need anyone to completely sacrifice themselves. What matters is that everyone lives authentically while staying connected. Through love and respect, the morning passed with light conversation and laughter. My daughter-in-law shared her plans for school and career, and my son listened attentively, nodding in support. My husband watched quietly, proud yet calm. He understood now that family strength doesn't come from everyone following the same path, but from mutual respect and encouragement. I took a moment to look over the records and contingency, plans I had maintained for years not to control or prepare for disaster. but to ensure that everyone in the family understood the importance of security and independence. I wanted my children to know that preparation is not a sign of distrust, but of love and responsibility. That afternoon, we walked together through the garden, talking about small but meaningful things. My daughter-in-law spoke about her anxieties entering the professional world, and my son and husband offered gentle guidance, supportive yet respectful. I listened, feeling a new balance emerge between personal freedom and family connection. By evening, the family gathered around the dinner table. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter under soft, glowing lights. We shared stories from the past, small memories filled with lessons. Everyone seemed to realize that family happiness doesn't come from forcing anyone to conform, but from allowing each person to be themselves while still loving and supporting each other. I looked at my daughter-in-law, eyes full of affection. See, each of us has the right to choose our own path, but family is always a place to return to, a place where no one is left behind. She smiled brightly. I understand now. I'll walk my own path, but I'll never stray from my family. My husband stood beside me, his voice warm. We've faced many challenges, but today we've grown. Love and family are strongest when we respect each other, give each other freedom, and allow room for growth. My son put his hand on his wife's shoulder and looked at both of us. We're lucky to have Mum and Dad. We'll learn to love, respect, and support each other so our family can always be happy. The family stepped outside together, watching the sun set. Golden light faded, but inside each of us, a profound sense of peace and connection lingered. Past conflicts, misunderstandings, and pressures had become valuable lessons. In that moment, I realized that a strong family isn't built on control, but on respect, love, and support, allowing each person to be themselves while staying connected. We laughed, shared memories, and gazed at the purple-tinged sky. I knew the journey ahead was still long, but today we had laid a solid foundation, one of genuine love, freedom, and enduring connection. In the weeks that followed, the family settled into a new rhythm, gentle, meaningful, and calm. The tension, arguments, and lingering anxieties had vanished, replaced by a sense of peace that permeated every corner of the home. Each family member began to reclaim their own space, now with a deeper understanding of respect and independence. One Sunday morning, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the family in the garden. My husband was tending the roses he had loved for years, while my son and daughter-in-law worked the soil, planting vegetables. Laughter echoed lightly through the air, not tense or forced, but genuine joy from shared effort and connection. My daughter-in-law turned to me, her eyes bright. I feel so much stronger now, she said. I'm no longer afraid that choosing my own path will disappoint the family. I see now that I can be independent and still loved. I smiled warmly. That's exactly it. Independence doesn't mean isolation. Family is always a place to return to, but it's also a place that respects who you are. My son stepped forward, placing his hand on his wife's shoulder, then looked at me. Mum, I see so clearly now what you've done for this family. Thank you for teaching us about love, patience, and responsibility. I'll do my best to honor both my wife and my parents. My husband stood beside me, his voice calm and warm. I realize now that what I once thought of as control was really fear of loss. Today, I understand that real love is not about control. It's about trust and that everyone needs to be themselves. I looked at my family, feeling a sense of harmony I had never known. Years of tension and misunderstanding had transformed into valuable lessons. Each person was learning to love without imposing, to trust without controlling, and to live authentically while remaining connected at lunch. We worked together to prepare the meal, laughter and conversation filling the house. My daughter-in-law shared her plans for further studies and career development, and my son listened, encouraging her. My husband observed quietly, smiling softly, understanding that family strength doesn't come from conformity but from support and respect. I took a moment to review the contingency plans and records I had kept over the years, not as control or precaution, but to ensure everyone in the family understood the importance of preparation and self-reliance. I wanted my children to know that preparation is an act of love, not distrust. That afternoon, we gathered in the living room, discussing personal goals and future plans. My daughter-in-law spoke about her anxieties entering a competitive work environment, and my son and husband offered advice, practical yet respectful. I listened, feeling a subtle balance emerge between personal freedom and family connection. By evening, the family gathered around the dinner table under soft lighting. The atmosphere was warm and filled with laughter. We shared old memories and small stories, realizing that family happiness doesn't come from sacrifice or obligation, but from each person living authentically while being loved and respected. I looked at my daughter-in-law with affection. See, everyone has the right to choose their own path, but family is always a place to return to when no one is left behind. She smiled, her eyes shining. I understand now, and I'll walk my own path without ever leaving the family. My husband placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle. We've faced many challenges, but today we've grown. A family is strongest when each person is respected, loved, and given their own space. My son held his wife's hand and looked at us both. We are lucky to have you, Mom and Dad. We'll learn to love, respect, and support each other so our family can always be happy and enduring. As the sun set, we stood together in the yard, watching the light fade. Inside each of us, a deep sense of peace and connection spread. Past conflicts and misunderstandings had become lessons of lasting value. In that moment, I realized that a strong family isn't built on control, but on respect, love, and support, allowing each person to be themselves while staying connected. We laughed, shared memories, and watched the purple-tinged sky. The journey ahead was still long, but today we had laid a solid foundation, one of genuine love, freedom, and enduring connection. One crisp autumn morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, and golden leaves scattered across the yard. My daughter-in-law was stepping into a pivotal chapter of her life, a new job, new responsibilities, and an environment entirely unfamiliar. She stood in front of the mirror, dressed in her professional attire, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. This was her first step, proving that she could be independent while staying connected to her family. My son stood beside her, pride and worry mingling in his chest. He realized that, despite their maturity, both were stepping into challenges of their own. He placed a hand on her shoulder and spoke softly, "You'll do great. I believe in you. Remember, no matter what pressure the outside world brings, family is always here for you." She smiled, eyes gleaming with determination. "I know. I'll walk my own path, but I'll never stray from the family." My husband watched from a distance, thoughtful. He remembered the early years of building a career, their effort, sacrifices, and tough decisions. He understood now that his role was no longer about control, but about being a steady source of support. So the children always knew they were loved and encouraged, no matter where they went or what they faced. On her first day, my daughter faced real challenges: workplace pressure, skill demands, and competitive colleagues tested her resolve. But within her, the values instilled by the family, patience, responsibility, and self-confidence rose to guide her through each obstacle. My son faced his own challenges, managing the family business. An important project hit a snag, and partners demanded quick decisions. He remembered the lessons from his parents. Don't rush, consider carefully, and uphold integrity in every choice. By doing so, he navigated the situation successfully, maintaining trust and respect from partners. Meanwhile, the family continued to uphold the values they had learned. Each evening, after a long day, they gathered at the dinner table to share experiences. These small but heartfelt conversations became threads that kept the family connected, reminding everyone that whether in success or setback, home remained a safe and loving space. One evening, my daughter-in-law confided in me, "I feel overwhelmed sometimes by the pressures out there, but I know that whenever I struggle, family is where I find strength." I hugged her gently. Exactly, family gives you the confidence to step out into the world, but it's also the place you return to for love and support. My husband, standing nearby, nodded. The world outside has its challenges, but the values we've built, respect, independence, and family love, will always be your guide. No matter what, family is your foundation. Over the following weeks, the family learned to balance personal freedom with connection. My daughter-in-law grew confident in her work, facing competition with calm professionalism. My son matured in managing the business, making decisions thoughtfully without compromising ethics. Evenings together became more cherished than ever. They shared experiences, failures, and small victories. My daughter-in-law learned to accept advice without feeling controlled. My son learned to listen and respect his wife's perspective, and my husband and I became guides and supporters, while still honoring the children's personal space. One afternoon, as they all sat on the porch watching golden leaves fall, my daughter-in-law said, "I realize that having my own space and independence doesn't weaken family bonds. It actually makes me appreciate every moment together more." My son smiled. Me too. When we respect and give each other space, our family grows stronger and our love endures. My husband placed a hand on my shoulder. "See, all the values we've nurtured: respect, trust, independence, and love are being embraced and practiced by our children. That's the greatest gift parents can give." I looked at my daughter-in-law and my son, heart swelling with pride. I realized that family isn't just a place to protect each other, but also where everyone learns to grow, be independent, and face the wider world with confidence. As the sun set, we stood together in the yard, watching the soft golden light fade. A deep sense of peace spread through us. The challenges of the outside world, work pressures, and personal struggles no longer seemed intimidating. Instead, we knew that wherever we go, family remains the foundation, a place where love and respect are always present. With the new day approaching, the family stepped into the world, but in their hearts, the values they had learned, respect, independence, and love, served as a guiding light, helping them move forward while keeping their bonds strong and enduring. One winter morning, soft light filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow across the house. The family gathered together, free from past pressures and tensions. My daughter-in-law had fully settled into her job, confidently facing every challenge, while my son had matured in managing decisions and responsibilities. Everyone realized that the strength of a family isn't built on control or sacrifice, but on respect, love, and allowing each other the freedom to grow. My husband looked at me, his eyes calm but warm. After all these years, we've seen that family isn't just a refuge. It's also where each person learns to grow. When we give each other space and respect personal choices, our bonds become stronger than ever. I smiled, feeling every word sink deeply into my heart. I knew that all the plans, contingencies, and efforts I had made over the years weren't about control or fear. They were about protecting the family and teaching lessons about independence, responsibility, and genuine love. Our daughter-in-law stepped closer, her eyes shining. Thanks to everything I've learned from you all, I've learned to stand strong and confidently face the world. And yet, I always know that family is where I can return, where love and support are constant. My son held his wife's hand and looked at us. We've realized that a strong family isn't about who sacrifices the most, it's about respecting each other, loving each other, and giving each other room to grow. I nodded. Exactly. Family is the foundation, but every person has the right to walk their own path. When we balance personal freedom with emotional connection, family becomes both enduring and truly happy. Together, we stepped outside into the yard, watching frost-kissed grass shimmer in the morning light. The air was crisp, leaves falling gently, blending into the rhythm of our peaceful life. We talked, laughed, and shared small but meaningful plans for the future. I turned to my husband, holding his hand. We've gone through so many challenges, yet today we see that the values we've instilled in our children, respect, freedom, and love, have become the guiding principles of this family. He nodded. Yes, watching our children step out into the world, face challenges, and still hold onto those values. I know that everything we did wasn't in vain. Family is truly where you learn to grow, love, and walk together. Our daughter-in-law leaned on her husband's shoulder, voice gentle. I see now that personal freedom and family don't conflict. In fact, when I live true to myself, my love for the family grows deeper and stronger. My son smiled. I've realized the same. Every decision, every challenge, even every failure, only makes us cherish our family more and love each other more deeply. As the afternoon turned golden, we gathered inside, sharing stories from the past, memories from when the children were younger, tales of challenges we'd faced. I realized that the greatest lesson we could pass on isn't about protection or control, but about how to love, respect, and trust each other, while giving everyone the space to grow and walk their own path. As night fell, we stood outside under the moonlight. The air was quiet yet warm. Past conflicts, worries, and pressures had become precious lessons, helping us understand the true value of love, respect, and personal freedom within a family. I turned to the children, my voice calm but full of faith. Remember, family is where you return, the foundation of love and trust. But each of you also has the right to walk your own path. When we balance freedom and connection, family becomes strong and happy. My husband held my hand, looking out at the yard. Let's continue to uphold these values, no matter how life changes or what challenges the world brings. Family will always be complete and whole. My son and daughter-in-law embraced, eyes shining as if making a silent promise. We will continue to cherish, love, and support each other. Family will always be our safe haven, the place we return to whenever we need it. I breathed deeply, feeling a sense of completeness spread throughout the house. After all the years, from challenges, arguments, to tough decisions, we had learned that love is not about control, but respect. Not about restriction, but trust. Not about total sacrifice, but balancing personal freedom with family connection. The story concluded under the soft glow of evening light, laughter and warm conversation filling the room. In the hearts of each family member, the belief in a happy, enduring, and loving family was solidified, ready to face new challenges and opportunities together.